Who runs the world? Girls, of course. Welcome to the Style and Vibes podcast with me, Michaela. I'll be giving you the inside scoop on music, fashion, culture, and more from Caribbean celebrities and tastemakers across the globe, pushing our culture with authenticity and, of course, style and vibes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Style and Vibes podcast, episode 12. This is your host, Michaela, and today we are diving into the idea that when it comes to music, there seems to be the notion that only one woman can be on top. Does it feel that way for you guys? Is it just me? I feel like we kind of see this all the time. We see, memes and even, have conversations with our friends around the idea of Rihanna versus Beyonce, Nicki Minaj versus Cardi B, Spice versus Shenseea, and it goes on and on across multiple industries. I mean, not even respective to just music, but across multiple industries as well. I think, there are so many talented women who make music, yet we find ourselves kind of fussing over maybe one, two, or maybe just a handful. The notion that only one woman can run things is crazy to me because there are so many different talented women across all different genres. And men can kind of compete without being pitted against one another unless it's like a direct, lyrical beef or they have personal feuds. But I kind of feel like when it comes to women, we have to pick a side for whatever reason. So, there's the idea of, having friendly competition, misunderstandings, and of course, relationships that just go wrong that kind of creates this competition and somewhat makes it personal. The fans kind of see it via social media or they read about it in magazines, as well as, see the artist's behavior, how the media kind of plays into it, the music industry really has, people behind the scenes that kind of have these conversations behind closed doors, and just circumstances and popularity. All of these things really play a role in the idea of what happens when women become popular in the music game. So it's not just me today. In this episode, I really wanted to get a feel for some other people's opinions. I think it's really important to get the opinions of others when trying to talk about, a topic like this one. And while it's not a round table, I'm speaking with our executive producer, Kerry, who definitely has an opinion, even from a fan perspective, and just being able to kind of understand the music business as well as, her place as a fan, kind of shares her opinion with us as well as Shawn of Reggae Talk Podcast, kind of giving that male perspective. And, we're all kind of dissecting why we feel that, there can only be, or is it that we're kind of thinking into it too much? So we're really dissecting the idea and sharing our opinions with you guys. Before we get into my conversations with Kerry and Shawn, I just really wanted to kind of share, even from a media perspective, working and being in journalism and podcasting and just being able to share the opinions of the masses. I think the media kind of struggles with, are we, sharing what the people want to hear? Are we asking the questions that the people want to hear? Or are we merely reflecting what the people are really talking about? So it's kind of like that chicken and the egg conversation. But I think it does we have a certain level of due diligence to kind of evaluate, is this a conversation that you want to continue having? Are we jumping on the bandwagon for hits on our websites? Are we really, developing engaging conversations when it comes to women in music and even in other genres? And I think it's kind of something that we as media personnel kind of have to think about when we're writing pieces, and even just, it might even just start off as a joke, but I think we've seen things escalate rather quickly. And I always say, a lot of times issues can be resolved offline. And, if a conversation is had between two people, then they can kind of, resolve whatever personal issues that they have. Now, if it's completely all about the music and you're leaving it on wax, then that's different. But when it comes to like deep-rooted personal issues, I think those should be addressed without the public's eye and ears. But I think a lot of times what happens is it kind of just spirals out of control, especially with social media. Social media has allowed for artists as well as fans to share their own public opinions on themselves, on each other, on what's happening in the news. And I think it opens up the door to kind of more scrutiny than ever before. So while I think competition is healthy to kind of, it sharpens, the skills of others when you compete in a way that is not mean-spirited. I think we kind of understand the sentiment behind when people are kind of going at each other and it's personal, and going at each other and it's just lyrical. And sometimes the lines definitely get blurred, and sometimes it ends up, resolving itself. And I don't think that we should try to do away with competition. I think it's great for women to just be able to compete, but it's also like, there's more than just one or two who should be highlighted, and not necessarily that you need the competition in order to be highlighted. I think doing great work outside of the antics should speak for itself. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. So the people that you see constantly are the people who are kind of stirring the pot a little bit. And sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes it's just not as beneficial to the culture or to each other. It just kind of seems like it's out of place in a way. But I think that there is such a plethora of talent across multiple genres. You can have so many different people contributing and playing in the same field and being successful in their own right. Everyone is a queen, everyone is a king of their own kingdom and in their own, in their own lane. So I don't think that it should be such a big deal for us to recognize just one or two or a few, because I hear men who completely sound the same over and over. So, I can't tell the difference between a few people that I hear that are men, but, they seem to continuously get the shine over, women as well. For every, 20 men that you hear in the music industry, you might hear one or two women. So I think it's also up to us to kind of really be better at highlighting those women who are doing great things in music and in their respective genres, in order to kind of push, a bigger plethora of women to the top. And then what happens when there are more women, and it's a little bit more equally yoked, I guess you could say, in terms of talent pool, then you'll kind of start to see all of the different bodies of work, and, people will be talking about more than just one or two. So today we have a very special guest. He is on another podcast called Reggae Talk, and it's him going in depth about all these different topics with reggae and dancehall specifically. Welcome to the Style and Vibes family, Shawn.
Yeah, man. Give thanks. Thank you for having me.
So this is going to be an interesting conversation, because I know you have a lot to say. You always have something to say, and it's all good things. So, I think you kind of being in the music industry and understanding as not only someone who does media, but also someone who just is a fan of music in general and not just dancehall and reggae. I think it's a great conversation for us to have, especially with recent events that have been happening surrounding women in music. And it's not particular to just dancehall and reggae, but, it's definitely very prevalent. But just the idea that there can only be one woman, no pun intended, on top. So the idea that, it seems like, especially like surrounding Nicki Minaj and Cardi B, like, it always feels like you have to pick and choose. So what is kind of your perspective in terms of why you think that is, from a music industry standpoint?
I mean, I think there's everyone has their own lane, you know what I mean? Everybody have their own lane, and there's food for everybody, especially with hip-hop. Hip-hop is a massive, massive market. There's food for everybody, but I think this whole one-woman stuff is it's not really the artist per se, but the fans. I think it's the fans who really egg this thing on. You know, you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the artist, for example, Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj. I mean, she's been around for a long time. It's like in the workplace when you have a senior employee who's been on the job for X amount of years, and they have X amount of time vested, and then you have the young buck fresh out of college. You know, they get a little insecure. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then the fans remember over time the generations kind of turn over. So the fans who were rocking with you 10 years ago, maybe they're not rocking with you again. You know, and it's really the young bucks. It's really the young bucks. So I always say that music, it's all about relevancy and time. You know, especially hip hop. Hip hop is a lot of it is disposable music, just like dancehall.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the fans change. You know, we did an episode called The Generation Gap. Basically, whatever that was popping to you years ago, or our parents, it's not popping to me. My tastes are different.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so
just
I think
like
a lot
same,
of it,
you know, they'll change in another 10, 15 years. Same thing. I get it.
Yeah, man. So I think it's a generational gap thing. For example, Nicki Minaj is about, she's approaching 35, or she's about 35 years old. So meanwhile, Cardi B is 10 years her junior.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no way Cardi B fans and Nicki Minaj fans have the same taste in music. Because Cardi B fans, many of them are teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Nicki Minaj fans, they grew up.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So again, it boils down to the generation. The generations turn over, and then from it's a social media era now. Social media is all about the youth, and the the what Nicki Minaj call her people, the Barbies, and what Cardi B call her people, her
was it Bardi gang or Cardi gang, something like that?
Cardi gang,
yeah.
Cardi gang. I'm pretty sure Cardi gang, they're not no 35-year-olds. Cardi gang, they're a bunch of kids,
mm-hmm.
and kids are mainly the ones who are on the forums. Kids are mainly the ones who are on the blogs. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think they're really the one who amplified this whole notion. Because if you listen to like the Breakfast Club, every second they make references to social media.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's kind of like the heartbeat. That's kind of like the pulse of the culture. And it's a youth movement.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that the artists play into it? As I feel like female artists play into it too much, and it kind of gets more personal than it does competitive.
I think they play into it, but I think they feed into the fans more. Mm-hmm. You know, like for example, with the on the dancehall side, them say Spice are the queen right now. She's the one that's the new age queen of the dancehall. Some people say, and I know you have young buck Shensia.
Mm-hmm.
Shensia do her thing right now. I think at one point they had like a little friction or something like that. Mm-hmm. I think they're friends now.
Yeah.
But a lot of it it goes back to the social media. You know, people feed into it. People, comments here, comments there. Spice read it, and Spice say, like you throwing shade and things. Shensia see it. You get what I'm saying? Then there was a thing with Jada Kingston as the next upcoming artist, and Shensia said, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think it has to do with the fans more than anything, man. They instigate the social media. They instigate a lot of things, and people feed into it. Yeah, that's just my take on the whole dynamic.
But I kind of feel like it doesn't happen as much with men per se. Like they do it, and they do go at each other. I mean, if you have Kanye's level of emotional attachment to ego, yes, it happens a lot more frequently. But I feel like for women, it's almost like you have to fight even harder to get that respect and keep it. And once you are no longer popular, it doesn't necessarily mean that you no longer have it. Because I mean, if you think about it, Jay-Z is no longer popular.
I agree with you.
Musically, he's no longer popular as he's popular to us because that's our era, and we're always going to have that love and affinity for him. But the Young Bucks aren't. They recognize his business. They'll recognize him more as his business savvy and being, Beyonce's husband than knowing, understanding his catalog. But he's still has managed to keep his respect musically and grow. And I kind of feel like as you know, as women grow in the space, they tend to want to compete with the younger generation rather than say, you know, it's your time. I'm going to do what I'm doing here, and I embrace you doing what you're doing over there. You know what I mean? I think Lauryn Hill might be one of the few that kind of just like, she sees everybody and it's kind of like, it's love, it's all love. Like, I don't see Eve, you know, either, you know, kind of really playing into that cattiness either. And, you know, people like, you know, from dancehall, you know, Marianne Chagan, like Lady Size before, so she's not even associating herself. So it's almost like, you know, the leadership. So even though like the fans kind of have a say in a sense, do you like, I kind of feel like the women have a certain level of responsibility to grow in there. Because remember, you know, Spice not young. Spice is, I mean, she's young, but she was popular, you know, years ago. Like, Fight Over Man wasn't yesterday. So, you know, I think she deserves that title of queen, because she's probably one of the only dancehall artists that are traveling at that level and can, you know, bill and pack and, you know, have that sort of stage presence. But, you know, song wise, she has a solid catalog, and she still hasn't reached her peak, I would say. Or she hasn't reached where she thinks she would like to go. I think she still has more that she wants to do, but she's not 22 like Shenseea.
Yeah, man. But I mean, if you're gonna say Spice, you say you think Spice is queen, and then you say her catalog is solid. I mean, a queen catalog can't be solid. You got to be great. You know what I mean? But I mean, that's a whole nother conversation with the queen and all that stuff. Because I mean, I think Spice is the queen at the moment. You know, because the queen is relative to your generation. You know, some people, even some of the young kids, still say Lady Saw is the queen, even though when Lady Saw was at the pinnacle of her career.
But at the same time, Lady Saw really had no competition.
I mean, she had competition. I mean, can name some artists from
aside from Tanya Stephens. But Tanya Stephens to me isn't even. She's in like a whole. She have her own kingdom. You know what I mean? She can queen something else. But
you see the thing with Lady Saw, you could liken her to like a Vybz Kartel, because Lady Saw was the queen of slutness and raunchiness.
Yeah.
You see how Vybz Kartel came and came with the wordplay, and he came with the imagery and all that stuff, and he kind of painted a picture that was different from what we were used to. That was Lady Saw. She said things differently. I mean, when I was a youth, Lady Saw music was banned in the house. It was prohibited.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying? And so she was an icon for that, you know, slackness and all kind of thing. That's kind of what made her into the queen of the dancehall. And then as her career kind of progressed, she kind of widened her catalog, and you know, and became much more dynamic, as opposed to a Spice, whose catalog is not really as much as, you know, it's not really diversified. You get what I'm saying? So that's why, I mean, Spice is the queen of the moment, because, you know, she has it going on. I'm really happy for her. She do her thing. But musically, I want to hear more from Spice. I want her to perform at those high profile elitist events in Jamaica and don't get backlash from singing her songs that people know. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I agree with that. That's definitely true. So in terms of like, and even in our conversation, I kind of feel like we're picking names out of a hat. There just isn't a plethora of artists that, you know, we deem talented, you know, to kind of go toe to toe. But that's not necessarily the case for you. That might be, I think, very specific to maybe dancehall and even reggae. But even in other genres, like I feel like there's other dope artists that are really doing, you know, amazing things that just aren't being recognized because of like they live in their own world. And I think social media has allowed, you know, artists to create their own fan base. Because I mean, we don't even discover music the same. We discover, you know, music through playlists and, you know, word of mouth and sharing. Like we don't listen to radio to hear new music anymore. At least I don't.
Absolutely.
So I think
I discover my own music.
Right. So you don't, it's not the same. So I feel like there's even more talent that's out there, but I kind of feel like we see the same ones over and over and over again. Do you feel that that's more of a media kind of thing, and we kind of have a due diligence to kind of shine light on others in the space doing great work?
Absolutely. I mean, there are tons of talented artists out there, but I mean, you know how it is. I mean, I can only speak for myself, and I don't depend on DJs and all these radio people to feed music for me. I mean, to feed music to me. I go out there and I seek music because I love young talent, and I love to share young talent. If you go on Reggae Music Forever, I mean, you see what I'm about. Mm-hmm. You get what I'm saying? But I think the model kind of shifted. The common fan, if you do, I think I did a little survey one time, and I was asking people how they consume music or how they find out about new music. And many of them say social media, their timeline. Mm-hmm. So people are kind of shifting from depending on DJs and depending on the radio to give them new music, and they consume it in different ways, primarily the social media.
So, final thought: what would you like to see more of from women in the music industry?
I want to see more women embracing each other, more women celebrating each other. You know what I mean? For example, I got to go back to Nicki Minaj, because a lot of people say Nicki Minaj is bitter because Cardi B is a new chick on the block or whatever. And I just want to see women breaking other women, lack of a better word. I want to see Nicki with some upcoming artists under her label. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's like Bunty boss enough artists in the dancehall and thing. I want to see Nicki doing the same, as opposed to everything being all about Nicki. I got to use Nicki Minaj because, this is really, that's really what everybody's talking about nowadays. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The whole Cardi B stuff. So just women celebrating women and, oneness.
I like it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Please share your Instagram, website, all of that, the podcast, what you got coming up next, all of that good stuff.
All right, you can follow me on Instagram at Reggae Music Forever, just like how you spell it. And you can check out our podcast at Reggae Talk, just like how you spell it. And we just released a new episode 6. That's our most recent episode. And that's titled Dancehall versus Reggae Beef. The dancehall artists versus the reggae artists. The reggae artists feel the dancehall artists are singing foolishness, and the dancehall artists, they're not really too. It's like a little you get what I'm saying? And then the reggae roots fans who don't really check for dancehall. So it's something to check out. It's definitely created a little stirred up the
stirring up the pot as usual. But I like it. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
we got to have you back because we got lots more to talk about. So we have a very good friend of the show and executive producer, Kerry-Ann Reed-Brown. But today she's sharing her fan perspective on the show.
Yeah.
So we are talking about the idea in music, and it's not just specific to Caribbean genres, reggae, dancehall, but across a lot of genres, the idea of only one woman being at the top. So the topic kind of really spawned out of some of the chatter around women in the music industry and how, one wants to be queen. And, if you think about dancehall, Spice kind of came into, her own queendom as, Lady Saw was kind of exiting. But even before Lady Saw, there were others before her. You have, Patra, and you have Lady G, and you have, like Sister Nancy and all of those people. And for whatever reason, I think because there aren't as many women on there at that level, there always seems to be the idea that there can only be one woman at a time. So as a fan who kind of is seeing some of this or, experiencing it through music, what are your thoughts around that notion?
Well, it's interesting that either now we're more, as the saying is, more woke and more aware of it, but it's really been existing for a long time, right? If you think about it, because when you thought of Patra, you weren't, I can't remember. I mean, Lady Saw was there, but Patra was kind of delivering something different. And so in that way, I feel like two women can coexist, but if it's a male dominated industry, it's almost like only one woman DJ artist can be at the top, even if you have varying styles. And it's like, you know, to the detriment of the other artists that brings variety, right? So if you want to make it in dancehall, right, and you say, okay, Lady G exit, Lady Saw comes in, and you know it's typical in dancehall that everybody copy the name, right? So you had Caputan, Simpleton, and all these Bantan, Buju, you know, Mega Bantan, Buju Bantan, whatever. And Lady G still there, but Lady Saw rises to you know the queen of dancehall that she is, and then you have Spice. So what happens? It doesn't allow a lot for the women to be creative and diversify or even grow, right? And I mean, we saw some growth from Lady Saw where she started out really racha, and you know that's kind of the staple or the way you identify Lady Saw. But I'm sure she wanted to create different songs. So like, you know, like Let Me Love You With My Heels On was kind of a different type of song, but it was just like, yeah, I like it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's almost, it's not only a one woman thing, but boxing that one woman or women in a particular category, the way they come out, and don't allow them to evolve, right? Mm-hmm. So men are, you see how, you know, or if they evolve out, right? So before Lady Saw went from dancehall to gospel, there was Chevelle Franklin, right? And Chevelle Franklin is popular with Beanie Man Dancehall Queen. She was the female voice on that song, and then she just transitioned and she started singing gospel. So you look at that. Buju was allowed, and even Capleton was allowed to go from slack dancehall to more conscious dancehall, and I don't see the women getting that same creative liberties to grow and diversify or experiment. It's almost the minute they get to that point, it's almost like, all right, they get put on a shelf and it's next for the next slap. And I mean, nothing's wrong with it, but it's like hypersexualized dancehall artists as a woman.
Do you think that that it kind of breeds a certain level of competition, right? And that's always kind of been, you know, the bravado of, you know, music like dancehall and hip hop. And to some extent, even, you know, pop culture, because, you know, everyone wants to be that one on the top. But does it breed, you know, a certain level of creative competitiveness, or does it seem to get catty?
You know, in doing my own podcast, you know, this one guy said there's no competition, right? And if we go back to Chimamanda, you know, she was like, competition is not necessarily a bad thing, right? For women, it's conditioned to be a negative thing. For men, it's conditioned to be what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And, you know, when you compete in terms of the quality and the style, and let's go back and think of, you know, ciphers and rap battles and, you know, clash, right? You are competing to see who is the best lyricist, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that is good in some way, but I think inherent in the way women are socialized, it always ends up going towards being a catty way. And then it's stoked by, you know, other people who have that mindset that, you know what, them, you know, like the dislike is not on a professional level. Like, you know, I love basketball. So you could watch on basketball, like LeBron and somebody, they having words on the court, but like when they off the court, it's just like, all right, fine, whatever. Some of them really do got beef, but it's like on the court, they're very competitive. And it's like, so, you know, that doesn't, a lot of times women aren't afforded that level of competition.
So as a fan, kind of observing some of this, and I think we kind of, you know, we see the memes, we see, you know, who's the top 5, you know, who's this, who's that. And quite often it's somewhat spun by either the fans and or the media. Do you feel like, you know, the artists kind of get swept up into, you know, what the people on social media and the media are saying versus focusing on their craft? Or is it kind of, it just comes with the territory, and as a fan, you kind of enjoy it?
It comes with the territory, and even the biggest of superstars to the lowliest of podcasters, or, you know, just as an everyday person, you know, I don't remember what I was watching the other day, and they say ego is dressed up insecurities, right? So like different people will in their ears as so. It just comes part of it, and it depends on what you want to hear, or not necessarily what you want to hear, but it really depends on who's around you. And, you know, some of the things you will take personal because we are humans at the end of the day. And, you know, there's ego, but there's like deep seated like emotions like, yo, I thought we were cool. You know, I was trying to build sisterhood. So, you know, some fans like that, me never really too care for it. It was just a matter of preference. So when it was Bounty and Beanie, you know, I would never say, no, play no Bounty tune, you know, Beanie Man on my art. I would never say that. It was just like, I liked more Beanie songs than I liked Bounty songs when it was Tupac. But it wasn't like I didn't like one or the other. I liked a particular style, but there were songs of the other that I liked. And that is kind of what people should focus on, right? Mm-hmm. There's the way how I do a podcast or how I do something or I cook my mac and cheese is different from how somebody else do it. It's not necessarily better. It's just different. And yeah, and it's embracing those differences because no mega trying to figure all business and philosophical, but essentially, you know, as artists, you're commodities, right? And if it's your commodities, you're like, you have a one bag of artists come out, what makes one singer different from the other? It's their differences, not their similarities. And, you know, from a business perspective, you know, you have to highlight your differences in order to stand out as opposed to how much you're the same. So if we embrace the differences and say, well, you know, this female dancehall artist or this artist is not like this one, then you'll be like, yeah, you know, that's a for them thing and them good pan that, me good pan this, you know, type thing. But, again, with the fans, they get caught up in whatever the fans want to do and whatever makes money, you know, whoever is behind the scenes, you know, shot calling, you know, you're kind of at the mercy of that. And it's a numbers game. And as much as we don't like it, sometimes you get caught up in the number of likes, number of plays and all of them something there. They play a role because, you know, it directly affect the food where you have to eat.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. But in terms of like, as you know, as you're listening to, you know, new music or even going back, even the idea of how much women are played, the ratio is completely skewed mm-hmm. in certain genres, you know, and even, you know, how many plays it almost feels like, you know, I'm constantly hearing Cardi B and Nicki Minaj when there are a plethora of other women, whereas you can hear a T.I., a Kendrick Lamar, a designer, you know what I mean? Like, they're all different in their own right, but they kind of live within the same space of the same genre. But it's almost like, okay, we have 20 songs that we have to, you know, we want to fill up this program in with 20 spots, but only 2 or 3 belong to women. And it's not necessarily gauged based on certain levels of popularity, but also like who's actually, you know, I kind of feel like there's something somewhat coerced around the rivalry within women.
Of course, yeah. It is. There's a level where it's kind of orchestrated. Mm-hmm. And, you know, then there's also, before it's even orchestrated, you fall victim to this heavy rotation. Mm-hmm. And you know, radios need to make money, all of these things. So you play what's popular. And if, you know, I do myself like a variety of music, like if I keep hearing the same song, but as I switch radio stations and for the most part, that's part of the reason why I hardly listen to like radio. I want to be able to select my own songs and certain songs like I can connect to on my own. Mm-hmm. But you're right. You know, heavy rotation, you're subjected to that. Like when I was introduced to that when I first came here, I was like, what is that? And no, it's everywhere, mm-hmm. right? You don't get a variety. You just kind of play this one song on repeat until you're kind of tired of it. Like I've had it so much that I just don't even want to hear the song anymore. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes it is who at whichever label or whatever is pushing it, you know. So there's so many hands in the pot driving that, and in a way, you know, we are getting force fed what they feel like we should get, as opposed to, you know, what we feel like, yo, I want a good song, this, I like it, right? And this is not new, because when you go back and think to the days when we did have cassette, yes, we used to get cassette and CD, right? You had a whole CD with what, 12, 15, 20 songs. And on some of those CDs, with the exception of some artists where a lot of their songs were played on radio and hit the charts, you probably heard 3 of the songs on an album on radio. The rest of it, you just had to know on your own and was just like, yo, I love that song. And sometimes people are like, which album was that? Because it's not played. So it's the question then comes like, as artists, how else can you introduce your audience to music that radio may not play in heavy rotation, but as an artist, you will gravitate towards a certain song. Mm-hmm. So like the bigger problem is the industry. And I think part of it is realizing that, okay, the industry is what feeds me, but I also have to be mindful not to get caught up in that cycle of how the industry can pit me against someone else when, you know, sometimes it's collaboration. But even then, right, let's go back to rap. So you had Salt and Pepper, you had MC, like you had a whole bunch of them around the same time. So I kind of felt like, you know, at some point there was variety. Granted, me can't count upon one and compared to the man, but still there was a variety because their rap was a different style, or their topic was a different style. Their dress was just different. There was just a clear difference. It's MC like Queen Latifah, Salt and Pepper, Moni Love, or, you know, Yo-Yo. You know, there was just different styles. And it's kind of the same thing with dancehall. When you look at, you know, everybody was, what's her name again? Our name is like at the tip of my tongue. Everybody's like, she's underrated. Tanya Stevens, but she just kind of had a different style. And it's embracing those differences that kind of help the music and the genre. Because if you feel like, if you're only pushing out one type of dancehall or one kind of reggae music, or however we want to categorize it, then people are going to be like, that's not for me. Whereas, you know, you look at the women in reggae music and its subgenres all together. You're like, we need the diversity from the women. We need women's perspectives.
Do you feel like you kind of touched on the late 80s, early 90s in hip hop, where you had like Queen Latifah, MC Lyte, Salt and Pepper. Like, I felt like there was a certain sense of camaraderie among them, and whereas, you know, you fast forward to, you know, a Lil' Kim, Foxy Brown, they immediately became rivals, like very shortly after, you know, both of their careers launched. So, you know, even Eve was kind of in her own lane, and, you know, Lady of, like, everyone kind of felt separate. So they had, you know, the big labels of the time, they had one woman as representing as their first lady of that particular label, which somewhat, I think, kind of contributed to the notion that there can only be one, because it's not like there was a roster of women under one belt who all kind of collectively brought something to the table. And it was the same with, like, you know, with J Records, and, you know, Olivia was signed before Alicia Keys, and they did nothing with Olivia. And you know, Alicia Keys became the cornerstone artist for the label. Like it happens in, you know, R&B, it happens all over. So what is it? What do you think it is, you know, that either the level of intense, like, you can't put all your eggs in one basket, but
me not have an answer. Me know the question you asked, but me not have an answer. I cannot understand why. I don't understand the thought process where I could focus only on one woman artist at a time and focus on busting her, whereas they have a whole roster of man and them are released differently. You know, literally the approach that we're saying can apply to women. You know, they are doing it with men, and they were like, we can only groom one woman at a time. And I'm curious, right? So even though Style and Vibes, Caribbean, but I mean, I'm curious. I get it. The Supremes were like, at the time, if you go back to Motown, the Supremes were like, you know, the bigger group, but they had a ton of other groups on the label. They just did different things. And so it's almost like, I don't know, as I not understand why. It just, because here's the thing, as I get older, I don't fall out of love with reggae. It's just that I can't jump up and down in a dance the way I did when I was younger. And I need to have the artist to meet me at the maturity that I am. And that doesn't exist because it's almost like they don't allow that to happen. You know, and that's kind of where, as business people within the industry, you got to say, well, you got to touch everybody, which is why oldies reggae will never die. Because guess what happened? Me reach certain age, make a drawback for the tunes of my parents listen to, because I feel like that's what resonates with me, because they're not keeping or playing the music that me feel like, all right, I'm a woman of a certain age, me now walk out, you know, me now meet a true, yeah, you understand me? So it's almost like, where's that music for the others, you know, that other, you know, when you're, you know, the mature level, you know, you see, R&B has it, you know, when you're boo-hoo cry, you're breaking up, and they have the ones where you're so in love, you're madly in love. Like, where's that? You know, so, you know, everything that's happening is to the detriment of the woman as an artist and as a creative being and a person that has emotions of very spectrum. But I have no reason as to why they just groom one artist at a time. And we've seen the story over again with Whitney, with Mariah Carey. They've moved somebody else out the way to make space for them specifically. And I can't tell why. I mean, I'm sure I've watched many documentaries that kind of give some explanation, but those reasonings don't make sense to me. Like, I hear what the reason they're saying, it just logically doesn't make sense to me as to why.
Last thought, what would you like to see in terms of progression for women in the music industry, as far as what it would look like in the future or feel like? What are you looking for?
Yeah, just kind of embrace the different styles. I mean, just embrace the subtlety of, you know, like, just how you're different, as opposed to you being the same, and owning that difference and knowing that, you know, it depends on their personal goals, and I can't tell them what their personal goals are, right? But if it's making music and making money, sometimes it's not going to be a stadium sellout. But that music does connect with somebody, and it's just kind of finding who that artist is. And I mean, I've heard the story over and over again where the women are making the music, what the label are put out, or the record label will say, oh, this is what's popular, make that. And they're just like, that's not me. So it's kind of figuring out how to make that music that appeals to your audience, because the record label can like it, but if your audience don't like it, guess what? Money not gonna make, because you're not gonna listen to it. So just I think it's audience in mind. Trust me, audience in mind is kind of where it's at, because when you connect with your audience, I'm gonna play your music. Even if you don't play it on radio, I'm gonna play the music. How many, like Cree Summer, and we know what they talk about reggae and dancehall. Cree Summer from A Different World. She had an album. It wasn't a commercial success, but I love that album. It was just like, she had some nice songs on there. She had a song on there with Lenny Kravitz. I was like, yes, but it wasn't, I never hear it on radio. I buck up and listen to, you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's and I just like it. Me hear some ratings because of that. So it's, because when the fame gone and you get to a certain age, you have to say, where you gonna look back on? The body of work you have, or, you know, the fame you had at a point, and people say, boy, I really liked her, she did sound good, but I just wish she did sing some, you know, better songs, deeper songs. But then all of that is still relative. So I just have to say, just make good music and focus on the audience, because that is what that's what dictates longevity. If your music can surpass the time that you made it for.
Very true. Thank you so much for sharing your fan opinion with me today, Kerry-Ann Reed Brown.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I know this was a hard topic to kind of talk about, and I know that there's so much that we haven't even talked about. So I really want to get your opinions. Please share with your friends, share this podcast with your fellow girlfriends, and definitely comment, share your opinion, share your thought. We should definitely have a round 2 if you have any thoughts around this topic and you want to kind of keep the conversation going. I'm more than happy to do another podcast to kind of follow up on it. Until next time, thank you guys so much for listening, and make sure you guys leave me a review if you can in iTunes so that, you know, we can continue for rank the ting. Until next time, Leah Tommy Peeps. Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Style and Vibes podcast. If you like what you hear, and I know you do, share it with your friends and family. If you want more, make sure you visit styleandvibes.com and follow us on our social channels, Twitter and Instagram @Style and Vibes. Until next time, Leah Tommy Peeps.